Hello students. Today we will see the next topic, that is the eroded soils. As we have learned, the soil erosion, which is a slow process, continues relatively unnoticed or can occur at an alarming rate, causing the serious loss of the topsoil. As and when the soil erosion takes place, this will give the loss of the topsoil. Soil erosion reduces the cropland productivity as well as contributes to the pollution of the adjacent water courses, wetlands, as well as the lakes. As you know, as and when the soil erosion takes place, it will give the removal of the topsoil. Thus, it reduces the fertility status of the soil, which will reduces the productivity of that land, as well as whatever the soil particles which are carried out with this water as a soil erosion, it will cause the pollution to the adjacent water courses, wetlands, as well as the lakes. If we see the definition of the soil erosion, we will find that the detachment and transportation of the soil mass from one place to another place through the action of wind, water in motion, or by the beating action of the rain and biotic factors is known as the soil erosion. Detachment, that is the removal of the soil particles, and whatever the soil particles which are removed, that will be transported from one place to the another place. Either it may be transported by the action of the wind or flowing water, or by the beating action of the rain as well as the biotic factors. It is known as the soil erosion. If we see the factors which causes the soil erosion, the first important factor of the soil erosion is the soil. Soil compaction, low organic matter, loss of the soil structure, poor internal drainage, salinization, and soil acidity problems are another serious soil degradation conditions which can accelerate the soil erosion process. As and when the soil is compacted, or when the soil is low in their organic matter content, or if the soil is lost their soil structure, or it will have the poor internal drainage, or the salinization, or the soil acidity problems. These conditions will accelerate, will increase the soil erosion process. Another important factor is the water. As we know, most of the soil particles, these are moved along with the flowing water or the water in motion. As and when there will be the greater the intensity and duration of the rainstorm, higher will be the erosion potential. As and when there will be the higher amount of the rainfall along with for a longer period, it will give the higher erosion of the soil. Third important factor of the soil erosion is the wind, and wind causes the erosion by the action of its velocity. As and when there is a higher velocity of the wind, it will give the higher soil erosion. And along with this soil, water, and wind, there are the other biotic factors which also causes the soil erosion. If we see the effect on soil erosion, there is loss of the soil to support the growth of the plant. We know soil is a media which acts as a supporting growth for the plant. And as and when this soil will be lost, it will loses the support for the growth of the plant. Deposition of the sediments loads causing the rivers to change the course. Whatever the soil particles that will be deposited as sediments or the loads, and it will causes the rivers to change the course. Variable seasonal flow of the rivers and flooding. As and when there will be variable seasonal flows of the rivers or the flooding, it will causes the soil erosion. as well as it will causes the water pollution, air pollution. Thus, if we see the effect of the soil erosion, there will be the loss of the soil to support the growth of the plant, deposition of the sediments, loads causing the rivers to the change course, variable seasonal flow of the rivers and flooding, water pollution, as well as the air pollution. Control measures of the soil erosion. There are the biological methods for control of the soil erosion. In that, we can go for the good crop management. We can go for the crop rotation. We can go for growing the cover crops to stabilize this slope. We can go for strip planting, as well as we can adopt this mulching, correct the staking rate of the pastures, use of the trees and hedges as a windbreaks. If we see the biological methods for the control of the soil erosion, there are 7 biological methods. In that, the good crop management. As and when we are cultivating the crops, we should cultivate the crops which will give the stabilization of the soil particles. Hence, we can grow the pulse crops along with the cereals, or we can say the tap-rooted crops may be cultivated along with the adventitious root system crops. Secondly, there we can follow the crop rotation. Cereals, then we can cultivate the pulses, then we can cultivate the cereals. Thus, tap-rooted crops and adventitious root crops can be cultivated as a crop rotation. We can grow the cover crops to stabilize the slope. As and when, if our soil or the land is at sloping side, then we can grow the cover crops, which will cover the soil particles, soil surface, and thus it will reduces the loss of the soil from that land. We can go for the strip planting. Similarly, we can use the various kinds of the mulches to stabilize the soil particles. We can correct the stacking rate of the pastures, or we can use the trees and hedges as a windbreaks, particularly in the high wind velocity areas. We can grow the trees and hedges around the fields, and this will act as a windbreaks. The second type of the control measures are the cultivation practices. In that, we can go for the contour ploughing. Already you know what is meant by the contour ploughing. We can use the graded furrows. We can obtain we will have the minimum tillage operations, so that as and when there will be the minimum disturbance of the soil particles, that soil will remain in situ. Besides this, we can go for the mechanical protections like graded channels, absorption terraces, bench terraces, or the irrigation terraces. These structures already you have learned in the course of the engineering. What are the graded channels, absorption channels, bench terrace, or the irrigation channels? These are the mechanical protections. Thus, if we see the control measures of the soil erosion, there are biological methods, there are cultivation practices, as well as there are the mechanical protection. Soil compaction. This soil compaction is the process in which soil particles are packed together in a closer state of the contact, indicated by change in the bulk density or the porosity. As we know, as and when there will be the heavy loads on the soil particles, these soil particles are packed together in a closer state of the contact. And as and when it will comes in the closer state, it will increases the bulk density. It will reduces the porosity of the soil. Thus, if we see the definition of the soil compaction, this soil compaction is defined as It is the process in which soil particles are packed together in a closer state of contact indicated by change in bulk density, porosity. Changes that occurs due to the soil compaction or compression of the soil solids. Soil solids, that is the sand, silt and clay particles. These sand, silt and clay particles these are compressed. These are packed together in a closer state. Secondly, compression of the liquid and gases. Whatever the liquid, that is the water and air which is present in that soil, that will be also compressed. That will be also reduced in size. Changes in the liquid as well as the gas content in the pore spaces, macro as well as macro process. Whatever the water or the air which is present in the macro and micro pores, that will be changed. And rearrangement of the soil solids. Whatever the sand, silt, clay particles, as and when these are compacted, it will give the rearrangement of the soil solid particles. If we see the changes which occurs due to the soil compaction, there will be the compression of the soil solids, compression of the liquid and gases, changes in the liquid and gas content in the pore spaces, and rearrangement of the soil solids. Already in the first course of the soil science, you have learned that this soil consists of 45% of the mineral matter, 5% of the organic matter, 25% water, and 25% air. But as and when this soil compaction takes place, it will give the compression of the mineral matter as well as the organic matter, and these are packed together in a closer state. Thus, it will give the compression of the soil solids. As this compaction occurs, it will also give the compression of the liquid and gases, whatever the 25% air and 25% water which is present in the soil, that also gets reduced. It changes the liquid and gas content in the macropores and micropores. Whatever the macropores and macropores consist of the air, while micropores consist of the holding the water. And as and when there will be the compaction, it will change the liquid and gas content which is present in the macro and micropores. As well as it will give the rearrangement of the soil solid particles due to the compaction. Soil cracking, you might have been observed the various kinds of the cracks which are developed in the soils, particularly in the black cotton soils. This soil cracking has high relationship with the phenomenon of the swelling and shrinkage which arises due to the expansion and contraction of the soil. In the first semester soil science course, you have studied the various kinds of the soil colloids or the clay particles. Whatever the soils which will consist of the montmorillonite type of the clay minerals have the property of the swelling and shrinkage. It means upon addition of the water, this montmorillonite type of the clay mineral will swell, and as and when there will be the removal of the water, these soil particles also gives the shrinkage. That is the swelling and shrinkage property of the montmorillonite clay type of the montmorillonite clay mineral arises due to the expansion and contraction of the soil. And this expansion takes place due to the addition of the water, and as and when there will be the removal of the water, it will give the contraction of the soil mass, due to which it will give the shrinkage of the soil mass, and it will give the development of the soil cracks, particularly in these black cotton soils or the soils which are having the montmorillonite type of the clay mineral as a dominant mineral. Soil crusting, it is the phenomenon which is associated with the deterioration of the soil structure, where the natural soil aggregates breaks and disperse. Whatever the soil particles which occurs, these phenomena in which the soil structure is deteriorated, the natural soil aggregates will break down and it will give the breaking of these soil particles, that is known as the soil crusting. We will see the influence of the soil crusting on the soil productivity. It acts as a serious barrier for the seedling emergence. As and when there is a deterioration of the soil structure, natural soil aggregates will be broken down and dispersed, and it will act as a barrier for the emergence of the seedlings. Crusting will give the clogging of the surface macropores and inhibits the rate of infiltration of the water in the soil, causing the runoff. Whatever the crusted soil particles that will clog the surface macropores, and as this goes into macropores of the soil, it will inhibit the rate of the infiltration of the water and it will causes the runoff. Loss of water storage in the soil profile and less availability of the water to the plant. As the soils has the less infiltration, there is a loss of this water storage in the soil profile, and as a result, there is less availability of the water to the plant will take place. It will causes the inter-yield soil erosion. Inter-yield soil erosion means whatever the movement of the soil particles, it will take place within the soil, and as the soil crusting gives the clogging of the macropores and micropores, it will causes the inter-yield soil erosion. It doesn't allow the natural removal of the water from that soil or natural movement of the water in that soil. As well as there will be the lack of the soil aeration, as these crusted soil particles give the clogging of the macropores as well as the micropores. These macropores are clogged by this, filled with these soil particles, and it will reduces the soil aeration. Thus, if we see the influences of the soil crusting on the productivity of the soil, it will act as a barrier for the seedling emergence. It will clog the surface macropores, reduces the infiltration rate, and it causes the runoff. It reduces the water storage, less availability of the water to the plant, causes the inter-yield soil erosion, as well as there may be the lack of the soil aeration. Then we will see the controls of the soil crusting. We can go for the surface mulch. We can add the organic matter in the soils so as to avoid the soil crusting. Application of the soil conditioners like polyionic conditioners as HPAN, that is the hydrolyzed polyacrylonitrile. We can add the VAMA, that is the vinyl acetate malic acid copolymer, and non-soil conditioner like polyvinyl alcohol. All these are the soil conditioners which will help to stabilize the soil aggregates and it will reduces the crusting of the soil. Besides this, we can go for the application of the gypsum pyrite in the sodic soils, lowering of the exchangeable sodium percentage and minimum the crust formation. As already we have seen that the sodium is responsible for the crusting of the soil. It will give the dispersion of the soil particles. And to reduce the exchangeable sodium content of the soil, we can apply the gypsum or the pyrite, particularly in the sodic soils, which will help to lower down the exchangeable sodium content of that soil, and it will minimizes the crust formation. A light tillage while the soil is still moist, break up the crust before it hardens. We can go for the light tillage operations. While soil is still moist, it will break up the crust before it hardens. All these are the control measures of the soil crusting. This is all about regarding this topic. On this topic, you may be asked, what is soil erosion? Give the factors causing the soil erosion and explain effect of soil erosion. Or define soil erosion and give the control measures of the soil erosion. What is soil compaction? Give the changes occurring due to the soil compaction. What is soil crusting and give the influence of the soil crusting on soil productivity. Define soil crusting and give the control measures of the soil crusting. You may be asked, define soil cracking. Explain the process of soil compaction and soil crusting. Likewise, these questions can be asked on this topic. This is all about regarding this topic. We will stop here.